Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the one issue that could very well ruin Tides of Torment as a DLC. And that, of course, is the endgame problem that the game has. Beyond, of course, the community backlash. And yes, the community backlash will absolutely have an impact on Tides of Torment sales. Things have quieted down, but quiet is not the same as peace. I've said it before, I'll say it again. But there is an actual issue in Warhammer 3 that may very well have a very negative impact on Tides of Torment, and that is the endgame issue.
Is this even a question? The answer is obvious. You've got an elf, a former elf, and the northern monkeys. Failure is in their genes. Even the trailer shows it.
Yesterday, 14 hours ago, I asked the question, how many turns do you enjoy Warhammer 3 campaigns for? 6% of people out of close to 800 votes answered below 30 turns, 28 between 30 to 50 turns, 41% 51 to 80 turns, and then 24% 80 turns plus. Now, it's interesting to think about that 51 to 80 turns answer, because a while ago, or years ago, Creative Assembly themselves, I believe, stated that most people enjoy campaigns for roughly 80 turns. Now, of course, the question here is not really relevant to the number of turns. It's rather, how long can you enjoy a campaign before it starts really feeling as a grind? And that does vary dependent on the player. If you are min-maxing and playing hyper-aggressively and so on and so forth, you can certainly get to a stage in the campaign where you're done before 30 turns. But that's not what most people will do. Most people will play more slowly. They won't min-max to a crazy extent. They won't get, say, a tier 5 settlement in 30 turns as Karl Franz, which, by the way, you absolutely can do with his growth and instant construction. Rather, they'll take it more slowly. That's fine. That's normal. Most people don't play a campaign the way I do. You know, this is my job. I spend a lot of hours playing Warhammer 3. Very different dynamic. But what we have seen again and again and again is that what people will do, they'll play a campaign until they feel that they've won. In the 20 years that I've played video games online, and the 30 years I've played video games in general, but in the 20 years, here's what I've seen. Most people, they just want to win a campaign. That's not to say that they will min-max, especially in single player. They might min-max in multiplayer, or they'll follow the popular meta at that time. But most people will seek to win at their own pace. That pace can vary, but we can absolutely see that 50 to 80 turns is the norm for the player base of Warhammer 3 and likely Total War in general. Why is that? Well, a couple of reasons. And it has to do with the game design. But essentially, once you've gotten past turn 50, even if you're not min-maxing, you've probably dealt with most of your foes. You've completed at least a short campaign victory condition, or you're close to completing a short campaign victory condition. You're aiming for a long campaign victory, and you are in a position where you can't lose. And there's not really much on offer past that point from a interesting gameplay perspective. And there is a lot in Warhammer 3 specifically, and just in Total War in general, that is going to make the experience not really so great to deal with. First off, we got to talk about automation. Yes, I know there is an automated system in Warhammer 3 for auto build, but I would rather play a Changeling campaign for 200 turns than engage with that system, because it's not good at all. What you really want is to have presets that you create as a player, or good presets by CA, so you know what the AI is going to build before they even build it. So as you're conquering territory, you can focus on economy, hero capacity, and military construction. Like, once you've built a big empire, Total War just kind of falls apart. It is the scalability issue of controlling an empire. You just don't have the real good tools for it, either in terms of managing territory or in terms of leveling lords and heroes. Like, maintaining a lot of heroes on the campaign map and a lot of armies is honestly a pain in the ass for myself and many other people, clearly, because you have to go through each of them, level them up. There's no bulk leveling, there's no auto leveling. There are mods that do this, to be clear, but there's no inherent system in the game that does it. And Crave Assembly's solution, by the way, to the item situation, which is still a problem, believe it or not, was like, oh, we're just going to give people fewer items but make them stronger. That isn't really a solution, CA. It just means that people are doing a different level of management of their heroes because they're swapping items from one to another. If they really care about combat power, they're not engaging with it at all. But by the way, in a long campaign, you're still going to have plenty of items, depends on the race, and don't even get me started on races that can construct items themselves, because, yeah, there's still a lot of tedium to be had. So you have things like heroes, lords, armies. Armies are, actually the least annoying aspect about it. Have a lot of money, just recruit everything, click a couple of buttons, and that's it. Come back 7 turns later, your army is done. But when it comes to provinces, diplomacy, etc., the lack of good systems for a really large and good empire where you're dealing with dozens of factions, controlling dozens of provinces, dozens if not hundreds of heroes, and I'm not necessarily exaggerating on the hundreds of part, depends on the race, that is where Total War falls short in so many different ways. And why is this a problem specifically for Tides of Torment, you might ask? Well, the simple reason why it is a problem for Tides of Torment, and generally speaking DLCs, you look at Tides of Torment trailer, you can see that they have a lot of single entities. They have 3 big single entities for the High Elf. So you have the Merworm, you have the 2 Sea Elementals. And I'm guessing, based on current DLC practices for Crave Assembly, that the other 2 races, so Norska and Slaanesh, are also going to have 3 big single entities. Single entities are actually one of the more expensive parts of a DLC. Like Crave Assembly in the past explained that making something like a Thunder Barge is far more expensive than making any other type of unit. Yes, reused animations, models, and with different textures on them. Yes, that can make things easier to do and cheaper to do. But all the same, if you want to know where a lot of the money goes from to build a DLC, it's in that kind of stuff. According to CA, I admittedly do find it a bit ridiculous myself, but so regardless of that, though, Tides of Torment is going to have a bunch of big single entities. But the problem with that is, if that's your selling point, it's gonna collapse. Like, if that's one of the main reasons you want people to buy the DLC, it's not gonna work out, given the fact that regardless of how many turns people play a campaign for, they're probably not gonna be in a position where they're gonna get a bunch of tier 5 units. They could, of course, decide to make, say, the Sea Elementals or some of those units, or 2 out of 3 of them, to be lower tier. You look at Kislev, one of the great things for Kislev, which has changed, believe it or not, is the fact that the Frostworm unit for Kislev is a tier 3 unit. So it's actually a big single entity, and it's freaking awesome to use. You will actually use it, as opposed to the Incarnate Elemental of Beasts, and I don't think I've ever recruited one in all the Kislev campaigns I've played since Shadows of Change. And yes, I have played a lot of Kislev since Shadows of Change has come out, pre-rework, post-rework. I have not really bothered with Incarnate Elemental of Beasts. Now, the way Crave Assembly has handled these kind of issues, okay, we're gonna lower tiers, we're gonna make heroes more available, we're gonna lower recruitment tiers, etc. But that's a band-aid. That's not really a solution to the problems they have. So one of the problems, as I mentioned, is the lack of automation scalability. The other problem has to do with objectives. The long campaign, short campaign victory conditions just aren't really that good. And developers apparently know, and there was an interview a while ago with the developer saying, I don't really like the endgame crises. They were just like added to have some form of endgame to Warhammer 3. The only one that's even remotely interesting is a Cast Dwarf one, and remotely interesting is saying a lot. Surprisingly, there are mods that do it better. So there's a mod called Chaos Invasion, which super buffs Archeon, so you are actually dealing with a real endgame. But there's a lot of issues. Concentration of legendary lords on a campaign map, so they end up destroying each other or neutering each other's potential in a campaign, so you don't end up fighting massive empires. The lack of a real scalability for the AI, so they start with the same cheats at the beginning of the campaign as they have as turn 100. So very few AI empires even emerge. And even when they do emerge, it's more of a tedium to fight them, because we then get to the issue of sieges versus field battles. See, once you've built a massive empire, you probably have some really powerful armies, right? Well, here's where things really fall apart for Warhammer 3. The battles you can most easily auto-resolve one way or another, the ones you can skip, more or less, are field battles, because you have so many different ways of dealing with them. You can ambush enemies, you can use lightning strike, you can just bring multiple armies and just, auto-resolve more easily a field battle than you would a siege. Whereas with a siege, you can't surprise the defenders, you can't ambush the defenders, you can lightning strike, right, if there's reinforcements nearby, but if there's an army of 20 units and there's 20 units in the garrison, you're gonna have to deal with all of that. Have fun with that particular dynamic. That is why things don't work out in long campaigns. Like, all of these issues combined. You look at sieges specifically, do you know what the problem is with sieges? And I can tell you something other creators have also stated. Whenever we do sieges, let's say we do Let's Plays, or we're streaming a campaign, but Let's Play videos or campaigns, do you know what portion of those videos or streams people don't want to watch? Our own viewers, the people who play Total War, who watch Total War, they don't want to watch people play sieges. That's how people feel about sieges. There are, again, mods to use on that specific for that specific problem. Like, you can use mods to completely disable sieges. You can use mods to remove the auto-resolve benefit that settlements have in the game. But that's where we run into another issue. A lot of people don't want to use mods because it just feels like cheating. Because really, if you're disabling sieges or removing the auto-resolve benefit, then yeah, you're basically cheating. That the game is inherently broken on that level is an unrelated issue, isn't it, compared to that? Or it is related, but that's not really a solution. So, and Creative Assembly is not doing itself any favors with the idea of, oh, we're just going to give people options to improve their campaigns, like things like Endgame Crisis or cults or how they want AI potential, etc. Like, having campaign customization is good, but the question I then have to ask as a player is the following. What is the kind of game you want us to play here, Creative Assembly? Because it's clear to me that the game you designed, the one, if you look at the default options, they kind of suck. Sure, you can customize and fix issues, but campaign customization should be used not as a band-aid to fix the developer screwing up with the default gameplay loop, but rather as something to enrich an experience for the kind of playstyle you want. But the default one, the one they're balancing, designing, developing for, should be really good, and it's not. And with Tides of Torment, that is the problem. Now, what could they do in a way that would work? Surprising, because there is a way, without automation, automatic leveling, sieges, etc. Well, Thrones of Decay did this. You want to know why Thrones of Decay was such a great DLC? Because it actually tackled this issue. It didn't tackle the inherent core problems of Warhammer 3, but it tackled the issue of long campaigns suck. Here's how it did it. Malachi. So Malachi's campaign is phenomenal, and the most played campaign in the game, by the way, according to CA's own statistics, but for these simple reasons, because it does a lot to tackle the endgame boredom that a lot of people feel.
So what you're saying is the elves can only succeed by stealing from the dwarves? Typical.
So you have short-term objectives with Age of Reckoning, you have legendary grudges, so as long-term objectives, you have confederations of legendary lords based on how many grudges you do. So it's not just a question, oh, I build a bunch of money or influence as Chaos Dwarves do. No, you actually have to go out there and do shit in order to get those confederations. Those confederations do open up a lot of the map. Now, sure, they've said that High Elves are going to have confederations, but it depends on how it does, because if they're doing Chaos Dwarves for the High Elves, that's not going to be good. If they're doing something more like the Dwarves as a standard, that is going to be good, because the Dwarves actually are fun from a confederation standpoint. They're spread out. You change the dynamic of your campaign significantly if you confederate Grumbrindle and fight over his territory, as opposed to, if you confederate Forgrim. And that's, of course, assuming Grumbrindle even survives. But then with Malachi, the final piece of the puzzle is his campaign dynamic is with his adventures, you then have a further objective. So you look at Malachi, you have short-term objectives with grudges, you have medium-term objectives with the adventures, and even some long-term ones, but mostly medium. And then you have long-term objectives in that campaign with Legend Grudges and really confederations. That is why Malachi's campaign is the best campaign in the game, because even though the core issues that I've just discussed in this video still exist, just the sheer amazing design of that campaign goes a very long way towards fixing it. And that's the conclusion of this video. If Creative Assembly wants Tides of Torment to do well as a DLC, I don't care how many single entities it has. What I do care about as a player, are we going to get a campaign that learned those lessons for Tides of Torment, or are we going to get another Man-Eater or Changeling campaign? We'll see what CA Sophia has done, but I'll be as blunt as possible. If CA Sophia has delayed the DLC twice just to add more single entities, I think the DLC is just gonna suck. As simple as that. If they haven't addressed these core gameplay issues in the campaigns they're adding, and if the college is like, oh, you can fight a lot of people. Yeah, I don't want to fight 100 different battles. Some people do, but again, core issues versus fluff. We'll find out. Costin signing out.